أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، بارئ الخلائق أجمعين، باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على خير خلقه العبد المؤيد والرسول المسدد، حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين وصحابته المنتجبين. قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الطلاق مرتان، فإمساك بمعروف أو تسريح بإحسان. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. According to Islamic law, the right of divorce is in the hands of the husband and not of the wife. If a husband chooses to divorce, he may do so, while by default, and I'll explain to you what I mean by default. By default, a wife cannot get divorced by herself. Some say that if this is not discrimination, then what is discrimination? If this is not oppression towards a wife or towards a woman, then what would be oppressive? If a husband has the right to divorce, he can end the marriage whenever he pleases, but a wife does not have that right. Is this not oppressive? Before we discuss this point, and before we give the answer, there are several points that I'd like to mention several introductions that I'd like to mention until we get to the answer. وصلى على محمد وآل محمد. According to statistics, that the rates of divorce in America and in Europe in the past couple of years have skyrocketed. If you look at the rates of divorce in the past couple of years, and you compare it to the rates of divorce, let's say about 50 years ago, definitely the rates of divorce now are much higher than they were 50 years ago. But what happened? What is it that has happened now that is causing couples to divorce that wasn't happening 50 years ago? Generally speaking, divorce rates have been skyrocketing, and divorce is spreading for several reasons. There are main factors, there are several issues that are considered the main factors behind why divorce rates are skyrocketing. And there are other factors that are not so effective. They're a bit minimal, but nevertheless, they exist and they do play a role. We believe that the most effective factor that leads couples to divorce is the issue of individualism. You see, sometimes when one spouse is oppressive to another, and the other spouse wants to get a divorce, this is something understood. It's something justifiable. If the husband is oppressive, he doesn't spend on his wife, for example. He's never home. If the wife is never home, if one spouse is being oppressive to another, and the other spouse decides to get a divorce, this is just the Bible. This makes sense. You wouldn't question the other person and say, why do you want to get a divorce? Because their spouse is being oppressive. But at other times, we see cases that people are getting a divorce, but without justifiable causes, without a logical reason. One of the reasons we feel, and this is encouraged in Western society, especially here in America, is something called individualism. Individualism means that what matters is you. You should worry about you. That should be your number one priority. Everyone else, including your wife, including your husband, including your children and your grandchildren, they all come second. Everyone else comes second. What matters is that you're happy and you're living the life that you want to live. Now listen, others want to agree, others are going to be satisfied and happy. Who cares? As long as you're happy. We live in a society that encourages pursuit of personal happiness, even if it's at the cost of losing your family, even if it's at the cost of losing your children. As long as you're okay, as long as you're satisfied, you're doing what you want to do, nothing else is. Isn't this the sort of society that we live in? It's all about personal happiness. It's all about individualism. It's about being selfish. It's all about I, me, I'm happy. Who cares about anyone else? Who cares if I have to own a family? That's why you might see a couple that's been married for 20 years. They've been married for 30 years. They have children. They have grandchildren, for God's sake. But over a small conflict, over something minimal, because one of the spouses decides that he is no longer happy, or she is no longer happy. She cannot continue in this marriage, bam. That marriage is over. What about this person that you've lived with for the past 30 years of your life, or 40 years of your life? It means nothing. What about your children? And your children's children? Who cares? Who cares about the children? As long as I'm happy, as long as that person's happy, they can do whatever they want. Unfortunately, this sort of mentality exists, especially in the West. Especially in America, the issue of individualism. Now, this is the main issue. This is the main factor. The issue of individualism. The issue of being in pursuit of personal happiness, even if it's at the cost of losing a family. Another thing that has become very common is the lack of family values. Even in American society, 50 years ago, 40 years ago, there were family values. Family came first. People would make sacrifices for a family, for their family. Today, no one makes a sacrifice for his family. They expect the family to make a sacrifice for them. They're willing to sacrifice their family. A lack of family values. Other things have also added salt to injury. One of the things that has come up, and don't misunderstand me, but one of the things that's occurred is that today women are more financially capable. Definitely a lot more financially capable from before. Now don't say that the Sayyid is trying to say that women are the cause behind it. Women are the reason behind divorce. No. Hear me out? Today, more than ever, women are more financially independent. Women work. We have professionals. We have women that are lawyers, doctors, engineers, teachers. Previously, women were less financially independent. They were more dependent on their families and on their husbands. While they were dependent, this became a motive for them to remain in the family. There's a feeling of independence. There's no fear of having financial burdens. There's no fear that you need someone to look after you financially. Thus, this might be one of the reasons that some, when it comes to the issue of divorce, they'll underestimate it. They'll take it lightly. It's not something horrific anymore. Among the factors that have led to the rise of divorce rates, especially in the past couple of years, social networks. Social networks have allowed people to communicate a lot easier than the past. Faster, easier. You'll be communicating with people from across the globe, someone who you've never seen before, and you'll be communicating. These social networks, they have their pros, and they have their cons. No one can deny the pros of social networks. The world has become a global village. People can communicate. Mass communication. With the press of a button, you can advertise for an event and get thousands of people to attend, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, social networks have cons as well. They've destroyed families. It's made it more accessible for people to meet and communicate and get to know one another. And at the end of the day, ruin some families. About 7, 8 years ago, when these social networks didn't exist, it was a lot more difficult for people to meet. Now with all these social networks, and every day there's a new network. The problems just keep on rising. Keep this introduction in mind. We come to the issue of divorce. When it comes to divorce, there are 5 main theories. The first theory says that there should be absolutely no restrictions on divorce, neither for a man nor a woman. If a man wants to divorce, he can divorce easily. No religious obstacles, no legal obstacles. And if a woman wants to divorce, say, no religious obstacles, no legal obstacles. There should be no barriers whatsoever. This is one theory. The second theory says that marriage is sacred. There should be all the obstacles stopping a couple from divorcing. A couple should not be allowed to divorce. This is the Catholic theory. In Catholicism, you're not allowed to divorce. Khalas. For richer, for poorer, until death. Do you part? There's no such thing as divorce. While the first theory is the Western theory. Whoever wants to divorce can get divorced, even if the other spouse doesn't agree. A wife can get divorced, she can file for divorce, even if her husband does not accept, and vice versa as well. These are 2 theories. A third theory says that divorce is possible, but only for men. Only men can divorce. Women cannot divorce. This is the third theory. A fourth theory says that men and women can both get divorced. However, there should be certain restrictions. But they're equal in this matter. The same way a husband can get a divorce, a wife can get a divorce. This is the fourth. And the fifth theory is the Islamic theory. Is that divorce is not impossible. It's discouraged, but it's not impossible. It's in the hand of the husband. It's in the hand of the man. However, there are certain options for a wife, for a woman, to also get a divorce. Thus, the door is not shut in the face of a wife. If she wanted to leave the marriage, there are certain ways. This is Islamic theory. To go into details, first off, Islam, unlike Catholicism, allows divorce. Islam says you're allowed to divorce. However, it is highly discouraged. It is highly unrecommended. In one hadith, الطلاق أبغض المباحات إلى الله. That divorce is the most abhorred, neutral thing that we can perform. It's allowed, but Allah hates it. Allah discourages it. Allah doesn't want you to perform a divorce. Once Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam noticed that there was a man who kept on marrying and divorcing, as if it was a game. Rasulullah told him that Allah hates such men who keep on replacing their wives. Every day they marry and they divorce and they remarry. And Allah hates a woman that keeps on replacing her husband. She divorces and she remarries. She divorces and she marries. One day Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam heard that Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, who was one of his well-known companions and whom he stayed at his house when he first arrived to where? To Medina. When he first arrived to Medina, he stayed at the house of Abu Ayyub al-Ansari and his wife, Ayyub al-Ansari. He stayed at their house. One day he heard that Abu Ayyub wants to divorce Ayyub. Rasulullah was at their house. He saw how they lived. He sent a message to Abu Ayyub. He told him, Ya Abu Ayyub, divorcing your wife Ayyub is a great mistake. You don't have my blessings. I don't encourage you to divorce your wife. And indeed, Abu Ayyub did not divorce his wife. Abu Ayyub was one of the greatest companions of Rasulullah, and he led certain battles. And today he's buried in Istanbul, in Turkey. If you ever go to Turkey, to Istanbul, go and ask about his grave. They call him Sultan Ayyub. I've been to his grave. I visited his shrine in Istanbul. It's a very beautiful place. If you go and visit him, beside him, Surah Al-Fatiha. There are lots of ahadith that discuss the issue of divorce and how discouraged and unrecommended it is. For example, in one hadith, ليس أحب إلى الله من بيت يعقد فيه الزواج وليس أبغض إليه من بيت يعقد فيه الطلاق. There is nothing more beloved to Allah than a house that a marriage takes place in. And nothing that is more hated to Allah than a house in which a divorce takes place. In another hadith, تزوجوا ولا تطلقوا لأن العرش يعتز عند الطلاق. The Prophet says, marry and do not divorce, because the throne of Allah shakes when a couple divorces. In another hadith, إن أبغض الحلال إلى الله الطلاق. The worst halal is divorce. Allah hates it. And by the way, there's a rumor, or there's a misconception regarding Imam al-Hassan al-Mushtaba, alayhi salam, our second Imam, that he used to marry and divorce. Some historians mention that Imam al-Hassan married over 100 wives. He kept on marrying and divorcing. I'm not going to talk about this tonight, because our last night, or at least my last night here at the White Man, which will be next Friday night, inshallah, and that night we will celebrate the birthday of Imam al-Hassan, I'll talk about this misconception. Is this true or is this not true? Did Imam al-Hassan marry so many wives and divorce, or was this a Umayya propaganda? This was propaganda from Bani Umayyah to injure the reputation of Imam al-Hassan. We'll talk about that our last night, inshallah. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Some might ask that if divorce is highly discouraged in Islam, if divorce is highly discouraged in Islam, and Allah doesn't want people to divorce, why doesn't Islam just ban divorce altogether, like Catholicism? Just close the door on divorce, khalas. Why allow people to divorce when it's something discouraging? Let's be like Catholics, and let's have our ulama stop people from divorcing. Why not? The answer is that yes, even though divorce is not allowed, sometimes it's what? It's necessary. Sometimes it's obvious that this marriage is going nowhere. Marriage sometimes becomes a living hell for the couple. The wife can't stand the man can't stand the wife. Islam isn't going to tell them, listen, you're going to have to live with each other for the rest of your life and I'm going to torture you. No. There's no torture in Islam. Islam says that if you've reached a point in which you can no longer look at each other's face without having a boxing match, don't divorce. Don't kill each other. Don't divorce. Each one takes his own path, takes his own way, and you'll remarry. Islam isn't going to force a couple to remain in that marriage. The Quran says that as long as you've decided you can no longer go with this marriage, you can divorce. فَإِمْسَاكٌ بِمَعْرُوفٍ أَوْ تَسْرِيحٌ بِإِحْسَانٍ. The Quran says that once you've divorced, after the 3 months waiting period, al-'iddah, at the end of the 3 months, it's up to you whether you want to take your wife back or you decide to spread ways, to take several ways. She'll take one path and you take one path. Islam is not going to force you to stay in that marriage. I remember I have a friend, he's white American, he converted to Islam, and his wife was from an Arabian background. He says that when I got married, the first 4 words that I learned in Arabic were as follows. Number 1, Habibi. Number 2, Hayati. Remember, he's American, his wife is Arab. Number 1, we learned Habibi. Number 2, Hayati. Number 3, Albi. And number 4, Ya Kalim. That's bound to happen. Sometimes that's just bound to happen. They say that a couple went to Jerusalem. Maybe you heard this before. They went to Jerusalem, a man and a woman, they went on vacation. They went to Jerusalem and his wife became ill during that journey and she died. So he wanted to bury her in Jerusalem. Or no, some told him bury her in Jerusalem. He said, no, I'm going to take her back to America. They said, but if you want to take her back to America, it might cost you up to $20,000. But if you bury her in Jerusalem, it might cost you maybe $2,000. He said, no, there's no way I'm going to have her buried here. I'm going to take her back to America. They kept on insisting, out of his interest to save them money, and he kept on insisting that he'll pay more and bring her back to America. He told him why. He said, listen, because the last time someone was buried here, he was resurrected 3 days later. Jesus Christ. So he said, I'm not going to have that happen here. Sometimes, my dear friends, divorce is necessary. Islam is not going to say, I'm going to force you to remain in this marriage. You feel that it is enough, you've given each other enough chances, and it's not going to happen. Islam is giving you the option of divorce. Now we come to our question. Why is it that Islam is giving the right of divorce to men and not to women? Here there are several opinions. There are several analysts with a couple of opinions, but I will only mention 2 opinions tonight. It's just up to you whether you'd like to agree with this opinion or not, or any of these opinions. But these are the opinions that are on the table. One opinion says that because Islam discourages divorce, and that Islam wants to reduce the rate of divorce as much as possible. Islam has put the right of divorce in the hand of the man and not in the hand of the woman. But you might ask, well, how is that going to reduce the rate of divorce? back a couple of nights, if you come back with me a couple of nights, when we discussed the issue, the psychology of men and women, remember, we mentioned that women are more emotional than men. The emotions of women are triggered a lot faster than men. No, so, like you agree or not, this is the opinion. That sometimes a woman gets upset and she might rush into getting a divorce because she's upset. Something has happened that upset her. Sometimes it's a big deal, and sometimes it's not a big deal. But in most cases, and I'll tell you this from personal experience, when we counsel certain groups, certain couples, they come to us asking for a divorce, and in many of the cases, the person asking for the divorce is the one not the one. In many of the cases. And sometimes we ask about the reason. Sometimes it's our obligation to ask about the reason. Why are you getting a divorce? Sometimes there's silly reasons. They're very silly reasons. They get emotional at the time. At the time, it seems like a big deal. But later on, you regret it. It wasn't a big deal. While men, on the contrary, they are emotional, but not as emotional as women. A man will not rush to say, let's get a divorce, as fast as a woman rushes to say, let's get a divorce. According to statistics, according to experience from communities, usually a woman rushes to ask for a divorce. Well, if Islam were to grant a divorce to whoever asks for a divorce, whenever a woman asks for a divorce, can you imagine the divorce rates? Can you imagine how many families would have ended? That's why Islam says, take it easy. Don't be emotional. Don't be emotional in the case of divorce. Islam puts it in the hand of the man, of the husband, and not of the wife. This is one explanation. This is one opinion. Another opinion, which is quite interesting, it's the opinion of Shahid al-Mutahari. Shahid al-Mutahari, a very well-known Iranian philosopher, scholar, mujtahid, alim, who was a martyr. He died in maybe 1979, if I'm not mistaken, in Iran, right at the beginning of the revolution. And he died at a young age. Shaykh al-Mutahari was an unbelievable scholar, thinker, philosopher. Unfortunately, he was taken at a very early age. And if he had remained, you would have seen his works and his theories. He would have had a huge future. It was the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to take him through. Shahid al-Mutahari has an explanation. He gives an analysis. He says that, and I've mentioned this before, that let's compare the nature of men and women. As we've said time and time again, that it's part of the nature of man to be the pursuer and the woman to be the pursuer. The man shows his attention to the woman and the woman receives attention from the man. The man goes after the woman, she doesn't go after him. He shows her his desire and his love and his longing. She doesn't do any of this. She only receives. And it's always the man giving and the woman taking and receiving. Shaykh al-Mutahari says that a woman falls in love with the man that shows her the most amount of love and the most amount of appreciation. It's difficult for a woman to fall in love with a man that does not love her whatsoever. This is according to the scholar, to this philosopher. That a woman, she's not going to fall in love with just any man. She will fall in love with the man that gives her the most amount of attention, the most amount of compassion, and emotions, and love, and nurture. Okay, this man, all of a sudden, his love fades away. His love begins to fade away. Here, what do? Do we tell him you have to remain in this marriage, or you have the right to divorce? He says we can't tell him to remain in this marriage. Not for his sake. When a man loses love and interest in his wife, we can't tell him to stay in this marriage. We can't force him. Why? Not out of his own interest, but out of interest for this woman. Why? Because when he stops loving her, he's even going to treat her differently. He's going to start treating her differently. He's not going to have the same amount of respect. He's not going to have the same amount of care. He's not going to show her the same amount of attention. His attitude and behavior towards her is going to change. And this is unbearable for a woman. It becomes unbearable. When a man loves her, he no longer loves her. We force her to be in that sort of relationship and marriage, it's unbearable. Nothing is worse than being in a relationship in which love is not mutual. Love is only one-sided. When one spouse loves the other, but the other doesn't love the spouse. This is unbearable, especially for a woman. Especially for a woman. Because if you come back with me, we said that the most precious words that a woman can hear from her husband is what? I love you. If she doesn't hear these words, or worse than that, if she doesn't feel them, not just hear them, if she doesn't feel these words from her husband, she'll feel like a failure. Thus, Islam says, listen, you don't love her anymore? You don't want her anymore? Divorce her. You don't need to keep her. Because when you keep her, you're going to oppress her. You're going to be oppressing her. She's going to be living in torture. At least when you divorce her, you're going to give her the opportunity to meet someone else, to love someone else, to marry someone else, to be loved by someone else. Shaykh Al-Qazwini supports his argument. He says that when a husband's love fades away for his wife, this is unbearable for the wife. This is torture for the wife. He supports his argument. He says that it's been scientifically proven through statistics that however much a wife receives love from her husband, it will show on her children. She will give that love to her children. If her husband shows her love and loves her, she will show that love to her children. If she's not loved, and her husband does not show her any emotions, she's not going to show her children any emotions. He says it's been tested on many children. The children that received the most amount of love from their mothers were from the mothers that were in return receiving love from their husbands. And the mothers that were the harshest to their children were the mothers that were not receiving any sort of affection from their husband. This might make sense. But now, you're probably thinking, if you're paying attention, you might be asking yourself this question, that okay, if his love fades away, he has the right to divorce. Well, what if what? What if her love fades away? How come when his love fades away, he's given the right to divorce, and he'll get to end the marriage? Well, what if her love fades away? She stops loving him. She no longer decides to no longer love him and live with him. What happens then? Shaykh Al-Qazwini says that, again, let's come back to the nature of men and women. He says that women, if you remember a couple of nights ago, if you were with us, women are attracted to men that are bold, that are forthcoming, that if they have a desire, will show that desire. Men that are not shy, not timid. And on the other hand, women are attracted to men are attracted to women that are shy, that are timid, that don't make themselves available, Or the modern expression, women that what? That play hard to get. Most men, of course, men are different. A lot of men are different, their tastes are different, and the things that they value are different. But generally speaking, men are attracted to women that play hard to get and don't make themselves available and are timid and shy. Now when this wife, having said this, keeping this in mind, when a wife no longer loves her husband, when she's no longer attracted to her husband, this is only going to make him more interested. This is only going to make him want to win her heart once again. He won her heart once, and he's going to do it once again. Because the more she pushes him away, because she's lost affection, she's lost love, he's going to try to win her heart back and become her Romeo again. And so on and so forth. So the more she loses interest, the more he's going to win interest. And he's going to gain interest. This is according to Shahidullah. Shahidullah, he says that Islam can force a man to remain in marriage. Islam can tell that man, being that marriage, you're not allowed to divorce. But it's not going to be the same for the wife. It's not going to be the same. When she owned his heart, and she doesn't own his heart, is he going to be treated her the same? No. She's not going to own his heart. She's not going to be his queen. That's why Islam says he's allowed to divorce. So what? These are several opinions. Think about them. Try to grasp them. Perhaps you'll think of an opinion of your own. Now, giving the husband the right to divorce doesn't mean that he can divorce at any time. Just because he has the right to divorce doesn't mean that he can divorce at any time he wants. No. Islam has put certain restrictions, certain obstacles in front of the husband. Number one, there needs to be 2 religious witnesses to witness the divorce. This is according to our school of thought. The school of thought of everything. So if a husband gets angry or at the stir of the moment, he can't just say you're divorced, I divorce you, and that's it. Because in certain schools of thought, in the Sunni school of thought, a husband can divorce his wife at any time. He doesn't need any witnesses. In fact, according to Abu Hanifa, the well-known scholar, that if a husband, in the middle of the night, if he accidentally in his sleep says, "Anti talib," his wife is divorced. So if you be careful, brothers, make sure when you eat, before you sleep, it doesn't mess you up and gets you to say you're divorced in the middle of the night. In the school of thought of the Ahmadiyya, you need 2 religious witnesses at the time of divorce. This is not easy. To get 2 religious. When I say religious, I mean practicing. They pray, they fast, they're religious. 2 religious witnesses. This is one. Number 2, when the divorce takes place, at the time of divorce, the wife cannot be on her menstrual cycle. She cannot be on her menstrual cycle. She needs to be pure. This is the second condition. This is going to what? Delay the process even more. The whole point is delaying, stalling. Because the more you delay, the more you stall, the more the man will have time to reconsider getting divorced. This is the second obstacle. The third obstacle, which is even tougher, the wife has to be pure on a purity in which no contact has been made with her husband. That specific kind of contact. What do I mean by this? She's pure in between 2 menstrual cycles. We call this period purity. She has to be on purity in which no contact has occurred. Well, that's almost impossible. That means if it has occurred, they're going to have to come back next month they're angry, because they're upset, because she, I don't know, she didn't microwave his food, or because he forgot her birthday, something happened, they decided to get a divorce. Once there's some sense into their brain, they come back the next month and they realize there's no need for divorce. The only point is to stop. Now, if a woman wants to get divorced, is there a way or is there not? There is a woman, there is a wife that can no longer live with this man. She's wished or limited. She can no longer live with him. Is there any solution or no? She's doomed forever. Yes, there are two solutions. Women have two options. Pay attention because this will help them. One option is before the marriage, and one option, and the other option is after marriage. The option before the marriage is at the time of the wedding, at the time of the Ketz Miktab, at the time when you're performing the marriage ceremony. A wife has the right to ask the husband to give her wikala and to make her a representative in divorce. But this has to occur at the time of Ketz Miktab. This has to occur at the time of the marriage. She asks him to give her wikala. This is a condition. She'll say, I will marry you only with this condition. That you make me your attorney. You make me your wakil. You make me your representative on the issue of divorce. Now, is he going to give it to you or not? That's another story. That's another story. Do we recommend this? That's another story. Personally, I would recommend this. Because the marriage is going to start with tension. If you do, this is an option. It's legitimate, it's religious, you can do it. Just like there's another option that we'll talk about tomorrow. There's another condition that you can set, but you'll have to wait to hear it tomorrow. You can set this condition, but is it recommended? It's another story. This is one option. If he gives you that wikala, if he gives you that representation, if you feel that you need to divorce, you can divorce as a wife. This is one option before marriage. The other option is after marriage. If you can no longer live with this husband for a reason, a justifiable cause or reason. For example, he oppresses you. He beats you. He doesn't spend on you. He travels all year long. A justifiable reason. He's a bad husband. You can go to a mujtahid, an Islamic scholar, a mujtahid, or someone who has a wikala from a mujtahid, from a masjid, and he can grant you a divorce. This is allowed. This is possible. This is permissible. Theoretically, this is permissible. Now, do some of these scholars grant the divorce or not? It depends on the case. You have to see the case. Well, sometimes the woman complains, but it's not a real reason. It's not a justifiable reason. She thinks that he's a bad husband, but necessarily he's not a bad husband. It depends on how that scholar views the case. Does she deserve the divorce or not? But this is an option and solution. Thus, the divorce is in the hand of the husband, but at the same time, Islam has provided options for women because it's not an oppressive religion. Tomorrow night, inshallah, we'll continue on the same line, but a different topic. Inshallah. Alhamdulillah.